Hi, I'm Marcia Lehman and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. Today we're doing the second P in the 5 Ps for growing vegetables in containers, and that P is prep. Specifically, prepping the mix that you're going to put in the container. So in the first P we talked about all the different pots we might use. Today I'm not going to do all that again. I've picked a 3-gallon pot to be my demonstration. And so I'm going to do a small volume. You may be doing a larger volume. You may have bigger pots. You may have more pots. I don't really do a lot of container gardening because I have 30 plus raised beds in my backyard. So I just have enough material here today to do a decent demonstration. The first thing I want to do is explain just how big some things are. So we talked about these containers being gallons and this being a 3-gallon container. How do you know how much media you need to buy for a 3-gallon container? Well, sometimes, like in seed starting mix, this bag is 12 quarts. We know there's 4 quarts in a gallon, so this is 3 gallons of seed starting mix. Now I don't want to use that to grow my vegetables in containers, but volume-wise, this bag would just barely fill the 3-gallon container. So the nice part is that I know I have a 3-gallon container. This is 12 quarts. That's easy. The actual mix that I bought today is labeled as 16 dry quarts. And I spent a fair amount of time looking at different size bags. And this one is in quarts, so 16 dry quarts, 4 quarts in a gallon. This is 4 gallons, so it will fill this container and we'll have a little bit left over. Now, when you get into the bigger bags, or if you decide to make your own mix, and you're buying perlite and peat moss in a larger quantity, it is likely to be in cubic feet. It's not uncommon to find a large bag of perlite that says 2 cubic feet. So I want to go through a little bit of explanation so you can make the translation between quarts and gallons and cubic feet. So let's start with, here is a square foot. It has only 2 dimensions. It's 12 inches by 12 inches, but it has no height. So that's 1 square foot. That's surface area. If we want a cubic foot, we make a box that exactly fits on top of that and is 12 inches high. This is a cubic foot. Now, what amazes most people? We know how big a gallon jug of milk is. How many gallon jugs do you think you could empty into a cubic foot box? And most people will guess 2, maybe 3. The answer is slightly more than 7, which just makes everybody stand back and say, really? You can get 7 gallons into a cubic foot? Well, let me show you how I explain this to people. I have here some half-gallon milk cartons, and the half-gallon comes up to here. It does not come up into the temple. But anyway, you can see that I can do easily 3 of these across. That means I can have 3 rows of 3 inside. That would be 9 half-gallons. That's 4.5 gallons just to start. But you can also see, if you look at where this ridge starts, that that's only about 7.5 inches tall. So I can get another one stacked on top, and I can do that 3 deep. So there's 3 more on top of the 9 makes 12. I can get one this way, that's 13, and I still have a little bit of space left over, which easily gets me to 14 half-gallon containers. Well, 14 half gallons makes 7 gallons. So I hope that that visually helps you believe me when I say that 1 cubic foot will have a little over 7 gallons. It's like 7.2. But just round it off and say 1 cubic foot is 7 gallons. So if you go buy a bale of peat moss and it is 3 cubic feet, 3 times 7, you're going to get 21 gallons of peat moss. That means you could fill 7 of these containers with just peat moss. And of course you would want other elements in there like the perlite or some compost, depending on the mix that you decide to make yourself. So I just wanted to help you understand how you can translate cubic feet to gallons, gallons to cubic feet, and figure out how much you really need for however many containers you have and whatever size those containers might be. So let me set this aside. And now that that's out of the way, I'm going to keep the 3-gallon container here because that's important. I said that I bought a 16 quart, so that's 4 gallons. That is less than a half a cubic foot, right? Because well, slightly more than a half a cubic foot. We said there's 7.2 gallons in a cubic foot. This is 4. 4 is a little more than half of 7. So just doing the conversion again. What I want to point out, I went to a big box store, and as I say, I bought a small bag because I really only intend to do this container. But yes, I read the front to make sure it says potting mix. I'm not a big fan of the ones that have moisture control in them, especially if you're going to be direct seeding, because experience with some other master gardeners has shown that when you direct seed into the moisture control potting mixes that have those little moisture beads in them, the brand new itty bitty little seedlings that sprout, if their roots are close to one of those moisture beads, they can actually drown. So if you are partial to using the potting mix that has moisture beads in it, then what I would say is fill your container up to about 2 inches from the top with that material. Then top it off with some seed starting mix, which does not have any of that in it. And then by the time your seeds sprout and grow down through the inch or 2 of this material and start to hit the potting mix with the moisture control, the roots will probably be big enough to sustain themselves. That gets to be a little extra effort, but I just wanted to warn you that direct seeding some of the spring season veggies into that moisture control medium often has results that you would not expect. So yes, I look at the front, there's none of the moisture control in this bag, but then I flip it over to read the back. This is what I really want to know. All this stuff on the front is pretty pictures and it's marketing. On the back, I'm looking for what are the ingredients in this bag, and it says this product is formulated from sphagnum peat moss. So peat moss is my first ingredient. I like that. Core, which is coconut core, the husk, the fiber stuff. Perlite, which is that white, it's actually volcanic rock, but it looks like crumbled up styrofoam. That helps to give some fluff and create some air pockets in our pot. And an itty bitty little amount of fertilizer. Now, why do they do that? Well, generally the potting mix is used, you put it in a pot, you transplant something else into there. Now, wherever that thing was before, assuming you bought that plant was already in a pot that had some fertilizer, so you don't need a whole lot more. The fertilizer amounts in here are in fractions of a percent, so it's really low, and we're going to want to add a little bit more fertilizer in here. My point is, when you read the label on the back, they used to say things like, includes bark fines, and everybody's like, what is bark fines? Well, it's just finely ground up bark, so think of it as mulch. And it's wood mulch. So wood mulch in a container is going to consume some of the nitrogen in this mix to help break down that wood mulch. So I'm not a big fan of buying a mix that has wood mulch in it. This product has none. I'm not saying you have to buy a product that has no wood mulch in it, and now they call it forest products. They used to say bark fines, now they say forest products, which means, I don't know, but it's wood. What I don't want, and what I would recommend you avoid, is buying a product where the first ingredient is that forest products, or bark fines, or anything that sounds like wood mulch. If it's a third ingredient, I really would like to see the peat moss and the perlite come number 1 and number 2. And the wood mulch could be third, which means there's a lesser quantity of it there. But if you have the option, buy one that has none of the forest products or wood mulch or bark fines in it. Okay? So always flip it over and read what's on the back, because that's where your instructions are. That's where the ingredients are. As I say, all the stuff on the front is pretty pictures. Now, I said we were going to add a little bit of fertilizer. We don't want anything that has big numbers. This is a small pot. So I'm partial to organic fertilizers because the numbers are always much lower. The handout says, okay, if you decide to use some 1010 because that's what you have readily available, you're going to use a much smaller amount than in the organic fertilizer, where the numbers are more like 433. Or this one is 364. This one is 444. And this one is 346. Those numbers are all way lower than the 10-10-10 that is a very readily available synthetic fertilizer. Now, why are we doing this? For starters, we're trying to grow something. It's not a flower, but we want it to grow and produce something that we can eat. So it's going to need a little bit more nutrition than what this fraction of a % of fertilizer that's in this bag. So when we have a number about this small, then we can use about a half a cup, which is not a whole lot, so half a cup is half of this, of any one of these organic fertilizers. And if I come over here and say, I'm going to say the same thing. The things on the front of the package are the pretty marketing. The important stuff is either on the side panel, 346 is where I find my NPK values on the side. In this case, they're on the back, and this one tells you how much to use for seeds and new plantings, how much to add to established plants and shrubs. So yes, I look at the front a little bit, mostly looking to see if it's organic or if it includes some of the good bacteria. But I'm especially particular to the Espoma brand. I'm not making a recommendation, I'm just telling you my favorite. And I like the Biotone starter for when I'm starting things. So let me take a pause. I'm going to clear some of this out, and we'll get on to actually mixing and filling this pot. Okay? Be right back. Let me clear some things first. Okay, so I'm back. I like to mix things in my wheelbarrow. Now, it may be just a tad large for this one bag of stuff that I have, but if you're doing more than 1 or 2 pots, pretty quickly the wheelbarrow becomes your preferred vessel for mixing your potting mix. I also measured out 1/2 cup of my organic fertilizer, and I like to use a weeding tool, my little 4-tine cultivator, and I'm first going to stir the dry mix together to get that fertilizer somewhat evenly spread within the dry mix. And then down here at my feet, you may recognize the donut glaze bucket from the other day. What I did was, last night I filled this 2-gallon bucket with water, let it sit because it was tap water. That lets the chlorine off gas because I don't really want to put that, even though it's a small amount, I don't want that in a mix where I'm going to be starting seeds. So, since I've got 16 quarts of dry mix, which is 4 gallons, I'm going to start with about half of this. Because what you will find is it takes a lot of mixing and a fair amount of time to get peat moss to take up the moisture. So I won't make you watch while I do all this mixing, but I'm going to mix, and at some point I'll walk around to the other end of my wheelbarrow and mix that, and we're going to give you a break while I keep mixing. Okay, just as a reference point, it took me about 10 minutes to get this to the moisture level that I like, and it took almost the full 2 gallons of water to do that. So keep that in mind as kind of a rule of thumb. I had 16 quarts or 4 gallons of mix, and I used almost 2 gallons of water. So it's nearly a 2-to-1 ratio. Start a little light, you can always add more water. If you get it too wet, then you're going to need to add some more mix to dry it out. So start a little on the light side in case you don't have more mix to put in. And how do you know when it is wet enough? Well, you'll notice I've put on a glove. I like to take a big handful, and if I squeeze really, really hard, I can get a couple of drips to come out, but not many. Part of what you saw falling was just some of the mix. But then if I drop it, that clump tends to stay together as a clump or break apart just slightly. It doesn't crumble like a broken cookie. So again, if I squeeze really hard, yep, I can get a couple of drops of water to come out. When I drop it from that height, it does break. But when I drop it from closer, it stays in that nice clod. So that is the moisture level that you want for your pot. And now we're ready to fill the pot. So you can use another smaller pot, a little bucket. I happen to repurpose old bleach bottles to be scoops out in the garden. So I'm just going to take my scoop, and I'll set that up there. And I do need, I do need to tamp this down a bit. But you notice I put 3 scoops in there already. And while it started as a gallon bleach bottle, I can't get a full gallon in a scoop. So I'm up to about here. So 1 more scoop, and then I should be good. And then, as I say, I'm going to tamp this down. And if I were smart, I'd put my glove back on. Bear with me a moment here. Put my glove back on and give that a good pressing. And I want it to be almost full. I have maybe an inch between the top of my mix and the top of the container. And as we said in the beginning, this is nominally a 3-gallon container. I had a 4-gallon bag of material. I added water, which caused the mix to expand a little bit. But I probably only have a little over a gallon worth of mix left. So if I were to top this off, I would use part of that, and then I'd probably have right about 1 gallon of mix left. So that's it for the second P of prepping your mix. You can buy your starting medium as I did today. If you really want to make your own, if I were making my own, I would use equal parts of peat moss. That's my preferred ingredient number one. Perlite, the white volcanic rock that looks like broken up styrofoam. And I would use a third ingredient of compost because I make my own compost, I know what's in it, and I would use equal parts. So mine would be 1 part peat moss, 1 part perlite, 1 part compost, and then I would add organic fertilizer to the mix, wet it up, I would be stirring in my wheelbarrow, and then I would be filling my containers. So that is the second P. Refer to the handout for any of the points that you may not have caught as we went along, and come back for the third P. And there's actually a 3A, which is then planting some of the spring cool season veggies in these pots. And later on we'll do what I call a 3B when we get to the summer veggies, because there's a little difference there. So this is the second P, prepping, getting your pots filled with mix. Thank you for joining us today.